Are you tired of watching your hard-earned harvests spoil within days, leaving you with a garden full of potential but an empty pantry? Imagine being able to savor the flavors of summer's bounty in the dead of winter, or share your homegrown goodness with friends and family year-round. In this video, we'll unlock the secrets to preserving your garden's abundance and revolutionize your relationship with food storage. From pickling, freezing, and everything in between, get ready to say goodbye to food waste and hello to an endless world of flavor and nutrition. And stick around until later in this video because I will share with you one of my secret strategies on how I preserve food efficiently with no electricity. Let's get it. In today's video, we're talking about 5 different ways that you can use to preserve foods. This is video 7 of 7 of our video part series of how to grow your own food at home on a budget. If you've been wanting to grow your own food at home and you're on a budget, then I'll leave a link above on episode 1 on how you can get started. First up is pickling. When you're pickling foods, what you're basically doing is using mainly vinegar or salt to lower the pH levels down to a pH level to where bacteria or mold cannot survive. Some quick examples of pickling methods would be simple as salted cabbage. You can basically make it with just one ingredient, and that's salt, and just rubbing salt into the cabbage, massaging it lightly, and then you can throw it in like a jar or a Ziploc bag and push out all the air and wrap it up, and then put some weight on the fresh salted cabbage, and you can just let it sit for 2 to 4 hours. Take it out of the bag or the jar and then just squeeze out the remaining water weight, and then you can throw that in the fridge and just have simple salted cabbage that'll last you for weeks. Other examples could be like making pickled garlic, pickled onions, pickled cucumbers. Here's another example of a simple hot pepper water that I made. And this was just by adding some vinegar, garlic, chili peppers, and I think a little bit of salt, and that was it. So just pickling simple things is an absolutely great way to preserving food. Here's another example of some citrus that I pickled years ago. This thing is at least 5 years old. And what I did was pick small little tiny citrus fruits called calamansi because my tree was just loaded with them. I picked a bunch and just threw it in this jar. And all I added was sugar and salt. That was it. And this thing has lasted for easily 5 years now. And how you can tell that it's still good is by just looking at the food in the jar to see if it has no mold or bacteria growth, right? So having an emergency stockpile of food is absolutely crucial. Make sure you start preserving some kind of food today. And you can always add a little bit of herbs in your pickling to add some extra flavor. Like for pickles, they use dill. So whether you're using vinegar or even citrus as a replacement, this is another good ingredient for pickling, is using citrus because of the acidic content in citrus and vinegar. One of my favorite organic apple cider vinegars that I love using, whether I'm cooking or preserving foods or whatnot, is this brand right here, Vermont Village. This is a pretty good vinegar right here. It's a good quality one too. Pretty awesome. If you haven't tried these guys, then I definitely recommend it. You can always add herbs, hot peppers, certain spices, and even some seaweeds into some of the foods that you're pickling to enhance its flavor, depending what you're pickling, right? So like the salted cabbage, you can easily add some kombu seaweed in there with a little bit of hot peppers. You can even add some ginger or garlic into it if you want. And at the end, you can sprinkle a little bit of soy sauce on the salted cabbage. And whew, let me tell you, it's downright delicious. So pickling is an absolutely great way for preserving food much longer than it would usually last. Number 2 is fermentation. Fermenting foods is another great way to preserve them for much longer than they would usually last. A great example of fermentation would be something like kimchi. Right here, I made some white kimchi, so it doesn't have the red peppers in it. That's why it's not red. But this was absolutely amazing to eat with like just by itself or even with a meal on the side. Eating fermented food often is definitely healthy for your gut. So if you deal with gut issues, try eating fermented foods more often and see how that works for you. This is another great example of fermentation right here. This is lilikoi wine. And basically what I did was take fresh lilikois, take out the concentrate, and then I mixed it with like a little bit of sugar and yeast. And then I let it ferment for a few months until it turned into wine. This right here is about 5 years old already. So it's very clean right now. I got out all the rubbish and stuff. So fermentation right here. Fermenting fruits and stuff. You can make wines. You can also ferment honey and make mead. Drinking kombucha is a type of fermentation. So there's all types of fermentation methods out there. And just realize that fermentation is a great way to preserving food and even drinks. Leave a comment down below and let me know what is your favorite method to use when it comes to preserving foods. Number 3 is canning. Canning is a great way to preserve food for long periods of time. If you got the space, something like a cellar or an area that is dark and quite cool, you can actually cook some of your favorite meals and then pour them into a sanitized jar, something like a mason jar. You can create some of your favorite soups or even meals and then put them away in some place dark and cool to last for long periods of time. This is a great way to be prepared for anything in case we have a global shutdown or who knows what is coming around the corner. Canning is a great way to preserve food for long periods of time. I know they have special cookers where you can put your mason jars in with your food and then it'll cook and sanitize it at the same time. So this is a great way. If you're looking to store foods for long periods of time and you want to ditch your old canned goods, then canning your own food is a great solution. I believe it's extremely important for people to have at least a basic backup food supply on hand always, just in case things go down. You just never know if stores shut down, if the barges shut down, if the boats, big rigs stop transporting food, at least you have an emergency backup. This is extremely important and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So having at least a basic setup is absolutely required in my books. Number 4 is freezing. If you have the freezer space to do this, what I recommend you getting is something like a food vacuum sealer with the bags, right? And anytime you harvest produce or if you have too much fruits, too much vegetables, whatever it is, if it's more than you can eat, then you can put them in these bags and vacuum seal them and put them away in the freezer. That way, they'll last for easily a year or 2. So freezing is amazing. You know, if you was to harvest like a whole batch of strawberries or something and it's just way too much, definitely freeze them, right? Later on, you can take them out for smoothies, you can make jams, you can make ice creams, whatever it is. Freezing is a method that most people can do. Having one of those food vacuums to take out all of the air in those bags that you vacuum seal is such an amazing way to preserve food for long periods of time in the freezer, because there's air in your Ziploc bag and you just throw it in the freezer. Just having air in the bag alone, it'll get freezer burn within like 6 months. Whereas if you use a vacuum sealer, it'll last years. You know, even with like coffee, sometimes you buy a big bag of coffee and it's just too much for you. You can just take out what you need, half of it in a jar or whatnot, and then the other half, you can vacuum seal it in a bag and put it in the freezer and it'll last a long time. That's just one great example of many other things you can do. Vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, oatmeal, rice, beans. You can vacuum seal all of this and throw it in the freezer if you have the freezer space. Here's a great example of freezing fresh fruit that I harvested recently. And this is absolutely delicious fresh mangoes from this summer that a friend and I harvested off the trees, took it home and peeled off all the skin and sliced it into nice big chunks and just stuffed it in these jars right here. You know, and we put them in the freezer right away. So now with this frozen mango, you know, I can make mango ice cream, mango bread, mango smoothies. The possibilities are endless. So freezing, definitely recommend it. Do it today and you'll be glad you did. You see this bottle right here? This is pure organic lilikoi puree that I harvested, extracted, and poured into this bottle about 5 years ago. Because I had so much lilikoi at that time, I must have filled like 20 gallons worth of lilikoi puree into glass bottles. I used up what I could and then I just threw them all in the freezer. So this is about 5 years later, and I took some out recently to just make a simple lilikoi juice. And let me tell you, it tastes absolutely amazing. And you can't even tell that it was stored in the freezer for like 5 years. So freezing is definitely highly recommended and one of the easiest ways to get started when preserving food. And another quick example is this bag right here. This is fresh macadamia nuts, and I got tons of them. By vacuum sealing the bags and then putting them in the freezer, this will easily last a couple years, because when you freeze, say things like nuts and stuff, the oils in the nuts don't go rancid right away. Where if you leave the nuts out in just regular room temperature, 6 months to about a year, they'll go rancid. But by freezing them, they'll stay pretty fresh for like a few years easily. So freezing is a great way. I highly recommend it. And number 5 is using the preservation method of smoking your food. Humans have been using smoking as a preservation method for thousands of years. People like to eat smoked pork, smoked salmon, things like this. And smoking is an amazing way to getting out the water content in the food so that bacteria or mold doesn't grow, right? So people buy their own smokers and stuff, or even build their own. There's 2 types of methods to smoke food. Some people do the low temperature, long smoke, or some do the more high temperature, faster smoking. So it just depends on your preference and what types of foods that you're smoking. I know personally for me, some of the best foods that I have eaten have been cured by smoking. Just having that extra flavor too from the smoke gives a lot of foods that really unique, distinct taste and flavor. And now for one of my favorite strategies that I love to use when preserving food. It's just simple drying and dehydrating. This is a rare herb called mamaki, and I love picking herbs and drying it myself with just the natural elements with no electricity needed. And I'll show you what I dry these guys in. These are 3 dry boxes that I have and use. These things are pretty much homemade with just the natural elements of wind and sun to dry foods like fruits, vegetables, meats if you wanted, fish and all that. This is definitely a great method when preserving food because it's simple and requires no electricity. As you can see in there, there's a sheet of stainless steel. So I just purchased some stainless steel online, like a roll of certain dimensions, and then what we did was we built the box around the stainless steel sheet. Here, as you can see, it's just a simple, very simple and basic setup that you can use for drying foods and dehydrating herbs, anything. Definitely get stainless steel for the trays if you decide to build your own. In my personal opinion, I would stay away from anything that is galvanized or aluminum if you're deciding to build your own dry screens. Stick with stainless steel, and even for the screens, you can use the regular screens that you use for your windows, or you can even use something like brass or copper screens, which would be even better. I went with the regular screens that we put on most of our windows, and then just a stainless steel tray, as you can see right here. This thing is absolutely gorgeous and works like a champ. So whenever I dry herbs and stuff, this is my go-to, always. If you made it to this part of the video, then I just want to say thank you for spending your precious time with me. I'll leave some links down below in the description box and some of the items that I've shown and talked about today. Unlock the secrets to preserving your garden's bounty and enjoy the flavors of the seasons all year round. Share your favorite preserved foods and recipes in the comments down below. And let's connect with a community of fellow food preservation enthusiasts. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more food preservation tips and tricks. Let's revolutionize the way we store our harvests and savor the goodness of homegrown food. If you have been wanting to grow your own food at home, especially if you're on a budget, then watch this video right here where I show you how to get started.